Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Equity Trust Studio. My name is John Bones. Joining me in the studio today is Equity Trust client and active real estate investor, Kimberly. And Kimberly is going to be sharing with our viewers and listeners today a little bit about the recent real estate transaction that she conducted in her self-directed IRA. So I'm really excited to have Kimberly on the call with us today. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, John, thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. So Kimberly, let's go ahead and just jump right into it with our viewers. Can you tell us a little bit about the real estate transaction, which I would consider to be very creative, but also incredibly simple all at the same time? Can you share with our viewers a little bit about how you found the opportunity, what the opportunity was, and ultimately what the exit strategy was for you on the outcome of that transaction?
Absolutely. Happy to share. The self-directed IRA was a brand new concept to me, and I've been investing for over 36 years in my professional life in 401ks and IRAs. I talked to my CPA and I said, I've heard recently about self-directed IRAs and I'm really curious about them, but I know that I need to know a little bit more of the ins and outs. He sat down with me and explained, the options, and he recommended Equity Trust right off the bat. He said they really know what they're doing, and I recommend that you talk with them. And so this was 4 years ago, and it was a relatively low threshold, John. It was $20,000 that I took out of, a pretty substantial IRA that I had existing. And I actually did this with a partner. I did this with a friend who's a real estate professional, and he said, let's go for this. So we did, and we rented a house to a single mom with 2 children in New York State. I live in California. And she just recently, this week, we finalized the transaction. She wanted to buy her home. And when we heard about that, we were all behind it. We're like, we're doing this for a number of reasons: to make some money, to help a person through their real estate journey. And that's how everybody won, is the way I'd like to put it. And I'm happy to talk about some specifics, but we all benefited.
That's Kimberly. I really admire what you said there and what you and your partner were doing, which is what we refer to here at Equity Trust Company is going beyond the return on investment. As real estate investors, and personally as a real estate investor, I, of course, want to make sure that I focus on running a for-profit enterprise and ultimately saving and growing my retirement account in a tax-free and tax-deferred fashion, but also looking at the ability to be able to offer affordable home financing and ultimately put someone in a property that maybe otherwise wouldn't be able to finance a property such as that. Can you expand a little bit further on that aspect of things for us? Talk a little bit about your philosophy and what got you involved in this sort of, if you call it, social impact investing?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a daughter of a Midwesterner, and I also am a product of a Jesuit university. And I have been taught from a very early age to give back your whole life. Don't write the checks when you're older. Don't even write the checks when you're younger and have no connection to whatever your investment may be. Make it something that is really palpable and that you can feel the direct impact of. And so I've made sure that a lot of my investments have that social impact long before they really had a high return or started to have a high return. It's just been something that I felt was important. Personally, I started getting into real estate 20 years ago this year. And the way I was able to finance it at the time was to borrow from my own 401k. I had an actual precedent. And I didn't know about that, but I did some research and I found that that's what I could do. And I am in San Francisco, where it's the most competitive, challenging real estate market in the country. And to have been able to get in on the ground floor elevator wise early on, to me, was extraordinary. And I had great success with that. And I'm now in my second home. And the first home strategy helped me, purchase the second one. And of course, I call myself a scrappy investor because I do this all on my own. And I look for the times when the market is adjusting, and I'll wait it out for a while. Like right now, it's red hot. It's a seller's market, not a buyer's market. And so anyway, I was schooled in that, let's just say, from personal experience. And then when I heard about this, I thought, ooh, here's a chance for me to be a bit more in the driver's seat. I like the idea of being able to allocate my funds towards projects and in real estate in particular, which I think is a really smart way to go. And Equity Trust afforded that opportunity through the way that you manage this.
Outstanding. So Kimberly, let's tell our viewers about the specific transaction. Can you walk us through the actual logistics? I understand it's a partnership with another investor,
Yes.
but can you walk us through that step-by-step process?
Sure. I mean, I'll do my best. I would never pretend to discuss how you all do your great work behind the scenes. But what happened specifically was my real estate friend called me and said, we each will contribute $20,000 to the purchase of this home. And we bought it outright. So we bought it, and then the home was already had a tenant. So it was a change in ownership. And rather than pay whomever the former landlord was, she started paying our trust accounts. And so each month we would get a rental check from her deposited directly into our equity trust accounts, written out to our IRAs. And then from time to time, when and if she had some of the classic issues that, you would address with a landlord, whether it was the replacement of a garage door or a fixing of a roof or any of those sort of home ownership issues, or home, owner issues, we would jointly make sure we had a property agent who really helped us out. She was extraordinary. She was on top of it, and she would let us know right away what the issues were, and we always resolved them quickly. So I would just caution anybody who wants to do this to be a proper landlord. And, so that I would say, I can't give you an exact number, but, over the course of several years, 4 years now, we had to allocate some money straight out of our account, which was so easy. Your bill pay wizard that you do. So if we had to pay for the roof, we would just get that done. And, or we also had the flexibility to be able to say, hey, listen, you've been a great tenant. We're going to skip the rent for December and have a lot of facility with that, just as a little bonus for the year or whatever it may be. And of course, the tax bills came through, and being joint owners and partners, I would just say that it's always best to have one person specifically manage that process. So if the other partner needs to write a check to the entity and then have the 2 checks sent as one envelope, that helped things out, because we've learned the hard way that it wasn't always clear that we were in partnership and people thought the bill was being half paid. So, that's just a little bit of the reality and the hiccup and the speed bump that you have when you have something like this. But, in the we got used to it over the course of the years. We found a way to make it work. And fast forward to, the spring of this year, and our tenant basically said, look, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I would like to make an offer on the house. And we said, originally we entertained a few possibilities. Would we finance it, or would we just sell it outright to her? And we decided to do the latter. And the transaction took about 6 weeks, because it's in New York State, where there's a lot of legal machinations one has to go through in order to transact a property. But for the most part, it was hiccup free. And I did a little calculation this morning on my original investment in the account versus my return, and it looks to me as if it's up about 24%, which makes me pretty happy, considering that my conventional IRAs that I have, they did close to maybe the low 30s, but I don't think that they necessarily had the same impact, John. I feel that we empowered someone along the way to become a homeowner for the first time, and there's nothing like that feeling. And it's actually encouraged me to consider doing this again and again. I would really like to explore this further.
That's fantastic. That's a great story, Kimberly. So what you're referring to is you had your return on investment, your cash on cash from the actual cash flow, the rents, but then you had your appreciation as well upon
Correct.
The sale of the property. All told, as you're factoring everything in, that was about 24%, you said, correct?
Yes, and that's after expenses. Yeah.
That's after expenses. Okay. How long did you have this property in your IRA? I know it's with a partner as well. They own a percentage of that property, but
Yes.
what would you say would be the duration of the investment?
I think it was close to 4 years. I looked at the purchase document earlier today, and it said 2017. I didn't double check the month, but 2017 was when we first purchased it. And then here we are, mid-September 2021, and that's when the transaction just concluded.
Fantastic. Well, again, congratulations, Kimberly. We appreciate the opportunity, of course, here to be able to discuss with our viewers how someone's put together a unique transaction. And then to go beyond just the profits, of course, the story that you told, that's absolutely remarkable about someone that was able to afford to purchase that house eventually after renting for 3 to 4 years. What were some of the barriers or pitfalls that you came across with self-directing an IRA, and how did you overcome some of those pitfalls?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that my former firm that I was working with my main IRA was not an advocate for this. They basically tried to say to me that there's a fair amount of paperwork, there's a fair amount of challenges. I don't know if you know what you're up against. And, I'm kind of one of those people who listens to good advice or advice in general, but I like to try things out for myself. And so let's just say that I didn't have the thumbs up. I've subsequently, not because of that, for a lot of other reasons, having mainly to do with service. And by the way, parenthetically, I'd like to say that the Equity Trust service folks are great. They're really, really great. And they really help you solve problems. And I really appreciated that. So that was the first thing, was sort of like this flashing yellow, red light from my former investment firm that said, we don't really advocate for this. I think it's still kind of new terrain. So I think there's not a lot of information out there about it. And you all certainly do a fair amount with your seminars and education to inform people. But I think it's always great to hear it from personal experience. The other things I mentioned were worth repeating, which is that, you got to be careful that you got to be sure to have a good property manager. I would say that, that's kind of like the keys to the kingdom, is having someone who's keeping an eye on things locally because you're a remote investor. I would say that, some of the paperwork challenges and trying to make sure that you're paying the bills, especially the tax bills, in a certain way, educate yourself on that and ask a lot of questions. The repairs, we're not able to actually see the problem. So again, the property manager being on site, not only for the management of the cash flow and that sort of thing, but also to troubleshoot and make sure that that property manager has a great network of contractors that they work with, so that things can be fixed reasonably. As a homeowner here in San Francisco, I've had a few surprising bills from vendors in the past where I was just like, I thought that was going to be 3 figures, not 4 figures, so that's really important. And I really would, I wish I could tell you more in terms of challenges, but I think the important thing is, if you're going to invest with someone else, have clear lines of communication open, problem solve together, take, I would say, roles and responsibilities and divide them up. I'm going to handle all the property tax bills. I'm going to handle all the maintenance bills, whatever it may be, so that not one person in the partnerships feels a little bit burdened, we never really had a lot of direct contact with our tenant. It was really through the property agent, but she was very aware of our personal involvement. And I think having a go-between is probably a really good idea.
That's a great point, Kimberly. And I find all too often that investors don't always consider a joint venture or a partnership with another investor. In fact, I have a lot of folks that will come to Equity Trust and they'll be considering using a self-directed IRA. And in their mind, they're thinking the only way to invest in real estate with my IRA is to have enough cash in that IRA to buy the property as a cash buyer, rent it out, or maybe do a fix and flip type transaction. But it's all their IRA. And what they're not considering is that they can partner with another investor. They can partner with a spouse or a friend or other family member, or even their non-IRA funds. And we have additional training and education, of course, on all of those various elements. In Kimberly's case, for all of our viewers and listeners out there, she elected to partner with a third party, with another investor. And we see this happen frequently, particularly around folks that might be involved in real estate investor association type groups or real estate meetup groups of sorts, where they meet other investors to put together these types of transactions in a like-minded fashion. So again, Kimberly, really admire that you went out and sought another investor and were able to put your IRA to work. And the other thing that I'll comment on is that you had mentioned you borrowed against your 401k. I didn't know that before. You borrowed against your 401k years ago.
Yes.
And now what you're doing is you're saying, hey, instead of borrowing against the account and paying taxes on the returns, I'm going to do the investment in the IRA, which is much different. and therefore be able to shelter all of that profit that you just made from taxation. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit for us on that?
Absolutely. And I would like to correct the record a little bit on the initial investment. So because I actually paid my IRA back for when I made my first purchase, and it was a 7% interest, which you can't beat when it comes to a loan, right? I mean, granted, it would be higher than what our mortgage loans are now these days, but still, you're paying yourself back. I look at it as a forced savings. In the case of this, yeah, it was, very, very simple. And I just felt, I felt that, regardless of, I would obviously love a higher return, but being able to pay one's own IRA back, there's just something very closed circuit comforting about that. Another point I didn't get a chance to underscore, but you made me think of it, was that, and I would suggest this to any of your potential investors or clients, look for markets that are, as my real estate partner said to me, kind of recession proof, not places that are going to be subject to, boom and bust, like many markets have, having to do with either a one economy town or whatever it may be. But look at markets where, there's been constancy in terms of, GDP, and just, real estate hasn't been a whole roller coaster. And I think people should also know that they don't necessarily have to go in for the, the big 6-figure real estate investments. They could find things that are south of that 5-figure. That's what ours was, so now for me, I felt like I put in my wading boots and I went partway into the river, and now I can, go a little further, and I'd be willing to risk more money in the future. So I hope that answered that.
That absolutely did, Kimberly. I appreciate that. And last but not least, what's the next chapter in the story for Kimberly? What's next financially with your self-directed IRAs as well as outside of your self-directed IRAs?
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'll answer the self-directed IRA first. I think what I'll do is I'd like to get together with my real estate partner and talk about maybe some other markets we might consider, or do we want to go back to the same market and look at another property? Do we want to try to find ways where we can do a similar social impact investment? You all offer a lot of seminars. I'm going to certainly tune in more to what you offer on the content front. For me personally, I'm now in my home 14 years in San Francisco. I bought at a good price just after the financial crisis. And I plan to sell this place. And what I want to do is go to a market, at least with my dollars, maybe not physically, where I can get in at a similar level and do my homework and find out that market is, on the rise population wise and all the things that it may offer. And, sit on some cash reserves. I'm close to retirement, technically, although I don't feel that way. Age wise, I am. But yeah, so I'd like to be in the driver's seat with my cash, and I hope to buy another, home for myself or for an investment. But on the self-directed front, I'm definitely going to visit more opportunities there, and the future will tell us what those look like.
Outstanding. Well, I appreciate it, Kimberly. Once again, on behalf of Equity Trust Company, we really appreciate the business. We appreciate you sharing your story. We find that our clients sharing their stories in the specifics of the investments that they've done ultimately fosters ideas and encouragement for other investors to replicate those same transactions or take some of those ideas and then build on from those transactions. So I would encourage all of our viewers and listeners to do the same. Once again, Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio. For all of our viewers and listeners out there, this is John Bowens here in the studio at Equity Trust Company. And until the next training, keep leveraging compounding interest in the absence of taxation. Thank you.